Staff, today I want to talk to you on the subject, what leaders expect from followers. You remember several months ago now in an Enjoy Life lesson, I did a lesson entitled, What Followers Expect from Leaders. And I received a lot of notes and letters and calls across the country from our Enjoy Life listeners who said, wow, that was really good. And leaders saying, this helps me to understand followers. But in a lot of the cards and notes, they said, sometime when you get a chance, if you would, why don't you just flip the title for a moment and deal with what leaders expect from followers. In fact, I had a lot of requests to do this, and that's what I'm going to really attempt to do today. I'm going to talk to you, staff, and share with you what the senior pastor, or quote, the leader, really does expect or desire from followers. And I want this to be real applicable to you. I want this also to be applicable to pastors building staffs across the country. You see, leaders do have expectation of followers. One leader had high expectation of a follower heard these words from the one who was lagging far behind. He said, I'm not underachieving, you are over-expecting. And I think there's probably some reality in that. I think anybody that's in a leadership position sometimes maybe is guilty of over-expectation. And I think sometimes followers don't know what the expectations are of leaders. What's interesting is I did this lesson, and I'm going to share with you in just a moment 10 things a leader expects from followers. None of this had to do with giftedness. None of this had to do with talent or genius or IQ. And so I suppose although a leader could over-expect from followers, I know I've been guilty of that before, I do know this, that what leaders expect from followers, if their heart is right, I'm speaking of pure heart, pure motive, if their heart is right, it is achievable. And my goal is for all of you to achieve it. My goal is for staffs across the country as they listen to this tape to achieve it also. But sometimes what the leader expects and what the followers think the leader expects are two different things. Remember, it was about, 2 years ago, I did an Enjoy Life lesson on the best ways to please your boss. Got a lot of feedback across the country on that one also. In fact, a lot of my titles and subjects really come from people who listen to these tapes and say, hey, John, why don't you speak on this subject sometime? In that lesson on the best way to please your boss, what was interesting is this was where followers were talking about expectations from leaders and leaders' expectations from followers. What's interesting is the top 3 expectations of a follower out of top 10 were the bottom 3 of a leader. In other words, what the followers wanted and what the leaders wanted were not even close. And as I remember giving that, in fact, I just cut that part of the lesson out to share with you. For example, the expectations of the followers were appreciation for a job well done, a feeling that they're in on the things, and management understanding their personal problems. Those were the top 3 things that followers wanted. And leaders, those were 8, 9, and 10. They were clear at the bottom. So what I wanted to do today is kind of clarify to you as a staff and to also our Enjoy Life listeners, as a leader, now this is just personal, these are my 10 expectations of followers. Let's go. Number 1. Positiveness. I expect those who are on my team to be positive. The ability to work with and see people and situations in a positive way. Simple enough, isn't it? Just a good, positive attitude. Number 2, servanthood. The willingness to submit, play team ball, and follow the leader. Basically just having a servant's heart. A heart to serve. Number 3, growth potential. This deals with the ability to keep growing as the job expands, and a hunger for growth and also a hunger for just personal development. You grow a leader, you grow a church, you grow a staff person, you grow a team. We are always responsible for our own growth, and when we are responsible for our own growth and we grow, those around us will also grow. Number 4, follow through. This is the ability to always come through. No excuses, basically job delegated and jobs well done. Number 5, loyalty. The willingness to always put the leader in the organization above personal desires. Number 6, resiliency. The ability to bounce back when problems arise. This is an attitude issue of just how do we deal with failure and hurt and fears and things such as that. Number 7, integrity. Trustworthiness. Good, solid character where our words and our walk are consistent. Number 8, big picture person. I don't know how better to say that except just to say it the way I did. This is the ability to see the whole organization and complement it the ability to look beyond our own departments, our own personal ministries, whatever. Number 9, discipline. The willingness to do what is required regardless of the mood. Just a self-disciplined life. And number 10, gratitude. An attitude of thankfulness that becomes a way of life because it is continually being expressed. Now, let's just a moment. I'm going to talk about all 10 of these today in the lesson. But before I start talking about them individually, if you just go down the top 10 list, or these are just 10 things that I expect, I'm sure if another leader came in here, their expectations would be different somewhat, but I would imagine at least, 60 to 70% would be theirs. But as I look at what I expect, positiveness, servanthood, now growth potential, that deals with ability. I believe that. I think that deals with a certain amount of giftedness, but also deals with a certain amount of hunger for personal growth, too. Follow through, just the ability to handle the detail, loyalty, resiliency, integrity. Most of these things are just basically personal attitudes and disciplines of life. Discipline, gratitude. Outside of growth potential, perhaps, big picture person may have a lot to do with experience and background. Follow through could have somewhat to do with details, but I'm really talking more about getting the job done without excuses more than the ability just to handle details. Almost all of this is certainly possible for any person who really wants to achieve it. I don't think it is. I don't think it's too demanding. I think it is demanding, but I think it is certainly reasonable. So what I want to do today with you, staff, I want to talk about these 10 and kind of share with you where I am and hopefully be a help to you. Let's talk about positiveness first of all. Louis Timberlake says that the top 2 reasons people fail is that they, number 1, anticipate failure, and number 2, they are fearful. Now, when Timberlake says that, it just immediately grabs me because both of them have to do with a positive mindset. And when he talks about the 2 reasons why we fail, fear and the anticipation of failure, both of them are a result of what I would call just a negative mindset, not being able to think correctly. And this is something we're all responsible for. It's the classic story of, you've heard it probably, of the traveling salesman who has a flat tire one night on the back country road, and he checks in his trunk and he didn't have a jack, so he's now going towards a faraway distant lighted house as he's going to go, of course, knock on the door late at night and ask somebody for a jack. And as he's going, he begins to play this mind game that we all play sometimes, and his mind begins to churn, and he begins to say things like, well, so suppose nobody comes to the door when I get there. Or suppose if if they do come to the door, they don't have a jack. Or worse yet, suppose if they do come to the door and they do have a jack, but they won't let me have the jack, and they're mean to me. And he's playing this stuff. By the time he gets to the door, knocks on the door, person opens the door without the person ever saying one thing. He said, just keep your darn jack. Now, that's it. Every one of us, haven't we played in our mind this kind of a scenario until by the time we got there, we probably made it a lot worse than it was just because of the mind games, the negative mind games that we have. Now, when I'm talking about positiveness, I'm talking about the ability and the choice in our life to look at situations from a positive way. I'm not talking about being Pollyanna. I'm just talking about being able to be positive, even about problems, and being able to have what I call a solution-conscious mind. And now that makes sense to me. And there are some marks of a positive person. Wow. I got these notes, these 10 marks of a positive person. I copied these down in 1973. I always love going back in through my files and my notes and pulling things out, and then there's almost always a story behind it. But the story behind the marks of a positive person that I did, over 20 years ago? Well, it was 20 years ago, 1973. The story behind it is I heard a guy speak one time, and his topic was very interesting. He called this, "Say Yes to Yourself." And the whole theme of this whole lesson that he did that day was say yes to yourself, and he was talking about a positive mindset. And he talked about how many people, they say no to themselves, not because of gifts, talents, opportunities, organization, structure, whatever it is. They say no to themselves because they have an attitude that is absolutely negative, and they are constantly going to hurt themselves. And so out of this lecture, Say Yes to Yourself, 20 years ago, I put down these 10 marks of a positive person. And it's really true. These are 10 things that you'll see in a positive person. Number 1 is enthusiasm. How true it is, positive people are enthusiastic. Number 2, self-confidence. With this positiveness comes a self-confidence that is certainly appealing. 3 is creativity. They are always basically on the creative side. Number 4 is persistence. That positiveness helps them through problems and gives them more hang time. Number 5, solution conscious. They are certainly able, because of their positiveness, to look at openings in problems and find some solutions. Number 6, they're likable. Positive people are likable, just like negative people are unlikable. I was just doing a seminar, 4 Skills, the seminary never taught me for Fuller. And I was trying to deal with pastors, and I was trying to help them just to get likable. I'm just trying to help them, smile, be nice, get likable. And in fact, I was kind of really working them through the process. I said, I've been watching now for 2 days, and I can already pick the likable people and the unlikable. I mean, some people, they're just not likable. I don't even know them yet. I don't even like them. I'm just talking to them, lecturing them. You know what I mean? You just look at their face. They're not likable people. I mean, they don't smile, they don't nod, they don't get with it. They're duds. They're sitting there and they're negative, and then they're wondering why people don't want to come to their church. We know if you don't look decent, if you don't smile, I'm not talking about being handsome, I'm just talking about doing the best you can with what you got. Just trying to be likable, okay? And anyway, so positive people are likable, just as negative people are unlikable. Come on now, staff. Don't you know somebody you don't like just because they're negative? Don't you know what I mean? You don't want to be around them. You certainly don't want to spend a day with them when you got a free day. I mean, there's a lot of things you want to do. You'd rather go pull weeds than do that. You know what I'm saying? Likeable. Okay, you've got that. Number 7, action-oriented. Action-oriented. Positive people are action-oriented. They're ready to roll up their sleeves and do something. Number 8, they have initiative. Positive person has initiative. They are basically self-starters. Number 9, they're generous. These are just qualities and marks of a positive person. And number 10, they are success-oriented. Now, these are 10 very true statements and marks of a positive person. And when I look for people, I want to look for positive people. A lot of times I'll have pastors come to me, and they'll talk to me about their personal secretary is negative. Or one of their key staff is negative. And I always say, well, why do you keep them around? I don't mean this to be, I'm not trying to be nasty, but why would you want to pay somebody to be negative? You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of people in your church you got to listen to. I mean, they're going to be in your pew anyway. You can't help that. But I mean, why would you put somebody on a payroll that's just going to be negative? I mean, what's your joy in life of paying people to be a downer all life? You know, and say, please, let me give you one more paycheck and kind of ruin my life and make me slice my wrist one more time. You know what I'm talking about? Why would you want to do that? Okay, you got the point. Positiveness, that's number 1. I told you, these are just from my heart. These are things I look for in people. Number 2, servanthood. A servant's heart. D.L. Moody said the measure of a man is not how many servants he has, but how many men he serves. I did an Enjoy Life lesson, 8 months ago on Second and Satisfied, which deals a lot with servanthood. But a servant is someone who sees a need and takes personal responsibility to meet that need. That's a good definition. Let me give it to you again. A servant is someone who sees a need and takes personal responsibility to meet that need. And there are some questions that a servant asks about a leader. Whenever I get on servanthood, I take a moment and dedicate this part of the tape to Barbara Brummingen, who was with me for 11 years, because she had such an incredible servant's heart, which became very important to me in her desire to always put my ministry at the top of her agenda. And when I began to do this, questions a servant asked about leader, all it did was I thought back to what questions Barbara would think and ask. And it was very easy for me to write this down. For example, and I think it's already in your notes, isn't it? Question number 1, what load are they carrying at this time? Again, she was always wanting to know about my load and always ready to listen, always ready to put anything down to just listen to me. So if I wanted to vent a while, I could vent. Always safe to vent to. Incredible. So, I mean, she not only had a listening ear, somebody's got a listening, some people have a listening ear and a talking tongue, you know what I'm saying? So I'm not talking about just let me listen to you so I can hardly wait to go tell somebody else. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a listening ear and an ability to keep your mouth shut. That's a real gift, okay? But she had a servant's heart, and she was always ready to carry that load. She was always asking the question, how can I lift their load? How can I lift John's load? What can I do for him one more time that will help him? Number 3, in what ways can I demonstrate helpfulness to him? And again, to a person who has a servant's heart, no job's too small. They never get into this place, well, that's not my job, or I think that's beneath me, or that certainly isn't what I should be doing with my skills or my ability. People with real true servant heart, they just want to lift the load any way they possibly can. And then the fourth question, is the leader doing anything that I can possibly do? There'd be times when she would see me get loaded down, and she would just say, Pastor, take a minute and just give me some of the things you've got to be doing. And I'd just say, well, these are the next 5 things I've got to do. And she'd look at him and she'd say, I can do the second thing, I can do the fourth thing. And she'd immediately start knocking it off for me. And she said, let me handle these. You take those 2 or 3, and away we go. I got a note the other day from Dan, and he has another. He totally shows me his servant's heart so many times. And he just I'm not going to read you the note, but he made one statement in there that is just so fitting to where I am. And he says, John, your load is obviously heavy, and my joy is to help lighten it. See, I love that. That's a servant's heart. Your job is obviously heavy, and my joy is to lighten it. I think that's truly a servant's joy, is to lighten the load of the leader. I love the last statement, and I'm ready to go to the next part. Servanthood is not difficult to define. It is only difficult to achieve. We all know what it is. It's just awfully hard for us to do it. Let's talk about growth potential. No tree is full growing. If a tree is still living, it's still growing. And when a tree stops growing, it's dead. There are 2 things I know about relationships. Number 1 is they both must grow. If any relationship's going to be good, doesn't matter what kind it is, they both have to grow. And secondly, they both must grow together. In other words, growth is not an end in itself, but growing together is an end in itself. And I think every leader looks for staff who have growth potential and have the ability not only to grow, but to grow together as a team. The 4 C's of growing relationships. The first C is communication, the ability for the leader to share with the follower where the growth is needed. The second C is change, what areas must be changed in the life of a follower to facilitate not only their own personal growth, but the growth maybe of their department and certainly the growth of the organization. The third C is cost, the price that will have to be paid for that growth. And finally, the fourth C is the challenge. Am I able and am I willing to grow in this area? Cartoon I cut out several years ago, Blondie cartoon, and the boss, remember Dagwood and the boss that was always smoking a cigar, J.C. Dithers or whatever Dithers was, a big cigar smoker. He's in a boardroom and he's talking, the boss is talking. And he says, and remember here at the J.C. Dithers Company, you can be all you want to be. And he points over to Bumstead. He says, Bumstead is a perfect example of that. All he ever wanted to be was a nincompoop. And here he is, and the charts are down, and he's a real dud. Well, he's being all that he really wants to be. Well, growth potential is something I think every leader has or wants their staff to have. This was a long time ago. I forget who gave this to me, but this is a thing of Chuck Swindoll's that I put in your notes. Organizations tend to lose vitality rather than gain it as time passes. Boy, that's true. They also tend to give greater attention to what they were rather than what they are becoming. It is easier to look back into the past and smile on yesterday's accomplishment than it is to look ahead into the future and think about tomorrow's possibilities. Good stuff. Well, if the difference is very simple. When we are growing, we are looking to the future. When we stop growing, the tendency is for us to reminisce and look at the past. And I think probably the most difficult thing I've ever had as a leader is in this area here, and I'll go to the next one in a moment. But let me just talk to you from my heart. It's always been very difficult in my life to, quote, leave people. I don't mean that in a wrong way. I don't mean that in a divorce way. I mean, I'm on a journey. And the hardest part has always been, especially with my close friends, and I can go, especially, my hardest days with this was in the early days, not so much in the later days. But in my early days, my college friends and buddies and colleagues, it just seemed like my first 5 years of ministry, I was just leaving friendships like crazy. Now, when I say leave friendships, we're still friends. But I was traveling, and they were stationed somewhere. And to come back 6 months when you've traveled and another person is all they've done is camped, it begins to be a different world. And I remember how Margaret used to sit down and really help me talk through that, because I had a tendency to want to stop traveling and go back and visit them and try to encourage them to come along. I remember one day Margaret looked at me and said, "John, look in my eyes." She said, "Let me tell you something. Not everybody wants to travel. Not everybody wants to grow. Not everybody wants to move. Not everybody wants to develop. Not everybody wants to go to the top. And you're going to have to understand this." Because she said, "You right now in your life, all you want to do is go back and one more pep talk, one more motivational time, one more encouraging hug, and try to bring them on with you." And she said, "Don't you realize there's a price to be paid, and some people don't want to pay the price, and you're going to have to learn all your life." And I remember she made this statement, "You're going to have to learn all your life that you have to leave people." And it was very difficult for me to learn, because I don't like leaving people. I'm too much of a sanguine to want to leave people. I want everybody to go on the trip with me. I want everybody to enjoy the journey. But I learned a long time ago that there's prices to be paid and there are decisions to be made, and not everybody wants that journey. And one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is in my journey to not be where I used to be and look at people who still are there and realize we're not on the same wavelength anymore, and changes have to be made. That's not only true in organizations, and that's not only true with bosses and staff, or leaders and staff. That's also true with marriages. That's true in everything in life, that we have to not only grow, but we have to grow together. And when we stop growing, the marriage is over, or if we stop growing together, the marriage is over. Whether it's a true physical marriage or a relationship in staff or whatever it is, the constant desire to grow and to keep growing. Wow. I know this. If I had my way, I would never lose a staff member because they quit growing. If I had my way, everybody would grow, and everybody would keep developing, and everybody would keep reaching their potential, and everybody would keep striving and hungering for personal growth. I know this. At 45, my desire to grow and learn, if anything, has increased, not decreased. I have no desire to coast. I have no desire to sit. I don't have any desire to kind of like the position or the title or whatever else comes. None of that does one thing for me. My greatest desire is to keep on growing, to keep on learning. I believe that I have more to learn than I've learned in the past. I believe I got more to grow than what I've grown before. And I can only say this for myself. I can't say this for you, staff, but I can say for myself, if I really thought I was done growing, if I thought that I had hit my peak, whatever the peak is going to be, it would put me into a punk mood that would make me look like a severe melancholy. I'm not sure what I would do, but I know this. I would be a frustrated person to be around. We always want to keep growing. We always want to keep developing. Okay, follow through. Let's talk about it. As a leader, my greatest need is to have those around me to be able to take an assignment and finish it with excellence. If that does not happen, notice this next statement: the load is still upon my shoulders. In other words, as a leader, if I can't find these good follow-through people, if I can't give out the job and have the job done in the way it needs to be done, if it comes back over my lap, then I have to really, with all honesty, say the load's still there. I didn't release the load. I didn't have the relief that I needed. And in my life, for me especially, I've needed door closers around me. And I've needed people who not only can follow through, but people who can close the door. And if you look again at the people that I have close to me, they have to be door closers, because I'm always having another vision, another dream, another project. I remember the day that Dick Peterson was on the plane with me, and I had my legal pad out, and I was writing very fast, and Dick got worried. He said, "John, I got to talk to you." I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "I just want to talk to you." I said, "What do you mean you just want to talk to me?" He said, "I noticed if you ever have 30 minutes all by yourself with a legal pad, you're going to create 5 more jobs for me." So I said, I just want to talk. We'll just talk. We're going to talk about the weather, talk about how high the plane's flying. Let's just talk so I can occupy your mind, because if I give you some spare time, you're going to be dreaming another dream, starting another company, give me another job, give me another assignment. Well, I do. And you know what I found a long time ago? For me, the job, it's much easier to open up the doors than it is to close them. And I also found a long time ago, for every 1 door opener you need about 10 door closers in an organization. And that's a fact. In fact, sometimes 10 aren't enough. But for me, somebody to follow through, to complement, to close the door, it's very important. I was thinking of a word the other day. This is an old-fashioned word. You never hardly hear this word anymore. But it's such a good word: diligence. Now you think about it. When's the last time you heard somebody compliment somebody else for being diligent? In fact, it's kind of like a slam. Is that the best you can say about me, is I'm diligent? Can I be brilliant? Can I be beautiful? Can I be something else? Diligent? I mean, diligence kind of It's kind of like saying, well, they're faithful. You know what I'm saying? And, oh, shoot, can it be something more? Can it be fruitful or exciting or something faithful, diligent? But when you think of diligence, look at this definition: the attention and care expected or required of a person. And a diligent person is three things. One, they're a finisher. Paul told Timothy, now the time has come for me to die. I fought well. I the race. I've been faithful. Diligent people are finishers. There's no question about that. Number two is that they're ready. Speak of the fact that they're ready. Paul told Timothy, be ready in season, out of season. There's a readiness about a diligent person that at the moment's notice, they're ready to help you out. And thirdly, they are exact. There is an attitude of exactness, like given in Ezra chapter 7, whatsoever is commanded by the God of heaven, let it be diligently or exactly done for the house of the God of heaven. For why should there be wrath against the realm of the king and his sons? There's an excellence about it that's really important. In other words, do it now, do it exactly as instructed, and do it until it is finished. Those are good words to describe a diligent person. A couple of weeks ago, here's a perfect example of servanthood. Here's a perfect example of diligence. Dottie was serving God on a cruise and and dedicating her life to full-time Christian ministry on a cruise with Russ. And Duane was, well, you were serving the Lord. You were a little bit better than Dottie. But anyway, Duane's gone, Dottie's gone. And I looked at Dan. I said, well, I don't have that much to handle, but who's going to handle what I need for the next couple of days? And Cheryl did the job. Cheryl jumped in, and I know, two things I know about that. The first thing I know about it is I know that Cheryl gave up some things to do that for me. I know that for a fact. I mean, I know because of her schedule that she put some of her personal desires over on the shelf to get that done. But she did such a good job just handling everything and taking care of it and assuring me of it. She was a great sub for those couple of days for Dottie and for Duane. And I thought, this is diligence. This is diligence's truest extent. And then, from the Latin word, diligence comes from really two Latin word meanings, and they're both interesting. One of them means to choose, and the other one means to choose earnestly. So you know what all diligence is a choice to choose earnestly, to love and care for somebody. And when you love them enough, you'll do the details, you'll do the follow through, you'll make up the difference. Now, I'm not a detail person, I'm not a follow through person. Everybody knows that. But during Living Christmas Tree, Margaret, because she doesn't get to see the family during the tree, decided to go to Florida to see her parents for a week. It was great. And I knew that she had a list of about 8 things that she really wanted to have done. And I made a commitment to myself that when she got back, all those 8 things would be done. So I got a list, and I mean, I worked through that list and I got all 8 of them done. And had great joy of writing 3 legal pages of all the accomplishments I had accomplished while she had been gone. It would make an enjoy life lesson, to be honest with you. But you know what my greatest joy was? When she came home, she wasn't expecting those to be done, and they were all done. And I remember how I could tell how much she appreciated it. Well, what I'm saying is diligence is it's almost the fact that you love somebody so much that you're even willing to do things that maybe are not even your own personality or your own gifts and your own abilities to really see them successful. And that's a good way to look at diligence. It's a good way to look at follow through. It's not some detailed person as much as it's a person that really desires that the dreams and the vision and the fruit of the leader is taken to completion, so that it really does get its fullest extent and its fullest influence, and it's just not left out there to where it's never ripened and it's never fruitful like it could be if somebody wasn't closing the door, being diligent and good in follow through. Next is loyalty. Let's talk about that for a moment. I had a good time doing this part of a lesson. In fact, I sat down and I asked myself visually, what does loyalty look like? And I think I have a picture of it that I want to give you today. Loyalty means several things. Number one, first of all, it means that you want the one you serve to be blessed. This is a wonderful way to describe loyalty. And there's a good example of that you might want to put in your enjoy notes. And that example is Eliezer. Remember the servant of Abraham? How true it was in Eliezer's life. His desire was to please Abraham, not just get the job done. And remember, and I know that because remember when he prayed, when he was looking for a wife or a bride for Isaac, remember his prayer? His prayer was, and I have it just a moment. Listen, O Lord God of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day and show kindness unto my master Abraham. In other words, he said, let me go out and get the job done for Abraham and really bless my master, really bless Abraham. Bless God, let this really be what he really wants in his life. And loyalty, I think, it's a wonderful picture. Whereas the focus of loyalty is as much on the master or the leader as it is on the job that's going to be done. In fact, can I tell you when you're disloyal? You're disloyal when your job and your position is more important than the vision of your leader. And Abraham looked at this and he said, more than doing a good job, God, bless Abraham. Really, may his vision, may his wish, may his dreams really come true. Let me tell you what else loyalty means. All these are pictures I just picked out from the Bible. Loyalty means that the one you serve can trust you. This is a good definition of loyalty. It means that the one that you serve can trust you. And for the example in your enjoy notes here, Potiphar is an example of that, and Joseph. Is that not true? Remember what it says about Potiphar? He left everything he owned in Joseph's charge. He did not concern himself with anything except what he wanted to eat. Now, this is a true picture of trust. Loyalty means that you are for the leader. That you are for, and Joseph understood that. Joseph realized when he was tempted by Potiphar's wife, he realized that there was such a trust that Potiphar had given him that he could not do anything that would ever violate that trust that the leader had in him. And what it really means is that the vested interest, the visions, the dreams, the heart of the leader is safe with the staff member or the follower because they really have learned to be trusted, have really learned to be trusted. But that's important. In fact, you can't remove trust from loyalty. You can't have loyalty without trust. Now, there are 4 pictures I'm going to give you. The first one, I want to go back to it because this is good stuff on loyalty. Loyalty means you want the one that you serve to be blessed. How focused are you on your leader and say, Lord, how can I do something that will bless the leader? Are you more job-oriented or more vision of the leader-oriented? Secondly, means that the one you serve can trust you. How trustworthy are you? Thirdly, loyalty means that you serve the way you have been asked. Now, this is powerful stuff. In fact, these last 2 pictures of loyalty I'm getting from David and a couple people that were disloyal to him. The first one you've read about in the Bible, but he's not a strong biblical character. His name was Amasa. Amasa was the commander-in-chief for a short period of time for David. Now, you maybe remember the name because it was Amasa who sided with Absalom for a period of time, and David forgave him and let him come back. And not only forgave him, David has such a large heart. He not only forgave him, you talk about loyalty. David could teach us something about loyalty when he wasn't king, and King Saul was king. If you really want to study of loyalty, of how he treated Saul when Saul was such a dirty dog, and yet he understood that he was to be under that covering, and he was to support and love a man who wasn't lovable or shouldn't have support. But David with Amasa, well, it was very interesting. Amasa came back and he forgave him, made him commander-in-chief. And then you remember, from the tribe of Benjamin, Sheba was trying to raise up an army against David. And very quickly was he raising up this army. And so David told Amasa that he had a day and a half to gather troops together. In other words, go and get as many supporters as we can because we've got to go to battle in a day and a half. And remember what Amasa did? Instead of doing it in a day and a half, he decided he'd get a big army. So he went down into the southern part of the tribes, and he didn't come back the day and a half when he was supposed to be back at the palace that morning for them to go to battle against Sheba and the tribes that were against David. Remember, David looked out. Amasa wasn't there. And David had to take his own household of the palace, his own guard, so to speak, and he had to battle against Sheba. Perfect example of disloyalty. Here's a perfect example of somebody working under the leader, and I don't think, I'm not even sure Amasa wanted to be disloyal. The way the story is told is kind of like he thought, well, I can even do it a little bit better than what David wants it, so I'll go out and get a whole bunch of guys, and yet he was being disloyal because he didn't do what the leader wanted. Usually when we think of disloyalty, we think of anti. It's not always anti. It's are you following the vision of the leader? Are you doing what the leader wants? It's just that simple. If you are, you're loyal. If you're not loyal. One more picture. Loyalty means that the authority of the leader is never usurped. It means that the authority of the leader is never usurped. In Mark Rutland's book, Hanging by a Thread, Mark's a terrific guy. Just did a conference with him and picked up his book, and he said something really good about loyalty. And I have it in your enjoy notes. Loyalty never usurps authority. It refuses to accept inappropriate love or praise that might properly exalt another. Loyalty is the glue that holds relationships together, makes families functional, and armies victorious. Loyalty is the fabric of society. Without loyalty, no enlisted man can dare to hope that his general cares whether he lives or dies. No captain can expect an inconvenient order to be obeyed. Without loyalty, marriage becomes a competitive minefield. Companies become dangerously paranoid. Boy, how true it is. Let me tell you the story of Absalom again from David's life. On a certain day of every month, the people who had felt that they had some injustice given to them in Israel could come to King David, and he was kind of like the Supreme Court, of which they could share their heart and their desires, and King David would kind of either say it's okay or it's not okay. But it's interesting, on the day that they would appear before King David, Absalom would stand by the gate in his chariot. Now, Absalom, as you know, if you remember the story, he was a good-looking guy with long, flowing hair, handsome guy. He kind of like Dan there, except he had hair. That's the only difference, I think. Anyway, Absalom's at the gate, and you know what he does? Absalom looks for all the discontents. And as they come through, he asks them, well, how did David treat you today? And of course, obviously, David's having to make all the hard decisions. He's up there and he's the final, and some of them are coming out and they're very unhappy because what David's just done, and they certainly aren't pleased with it. And Absalom says, well, you can't quite blame David. He's a busy guy, and if I were the king, here's what I would do. And basically, Absalom steps in between the leader who has to make the hard decisions and the staff member who sometimes doesn't have to make the hard decisions. I still remember well, I had a staff member several years ago who basically was a good listener. And I had to sit down with him one day and I said, you know, when you listen to people, I've noticed you listen to them and you don't say, well, you don't know the other side of the story. You don't stand up the way you need to stand up for what's right. And I said, you just listen. And I said, let me tell you something. When you just listen and you don't stand up for right, people think you agree with them. And he didn't aim to do that. In this case, this staff member was just a weak person, really didn't have a lot of courage in his life. But the bottom line was, Absalom sat there and got in between the leader's hard decisions. And one thing the leader realizes is that all the decisions they make are not always going to be the popular ones. And basically sat at the gate and waited for the people that weren't happy. He said, well, I tell you, if I would have been, and played that if game that is always for weak people who never have to make any hard decisions in their own life. If they'd gotten thrown one day, they'd blow it for sure. And it says something very interesting in the Bible. It says, and I'll just read this one statement when it talks about Absalom and what he did in the whole process. And it says that about Absalom. He said, so Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. See what he did? He basically got in between and said, well, no, I don't think I would have done this. I want to tell you what, when you do that to your leader, to your pastor, to your supervisor, to whoever, when you walk in and start playing that game, you're disloyal. You're not supporting the leader like you need to support the leader. Now, if you disagree with the decision, it's no problem. Go to the leader. Sit down and explain to the leader. Ask, why did you do this? I told Dottie today, 2 times today in the office, I did a mid-course correction. Both of them needed big deals, but they were just mid-course corrections. And I told Dottie, I said, Dottie, I want to always be open with you. I want to share with you what I want, what I don't want, what I like, what I don't like. And I said, I always try to tell you why. And the reason I try to tell her why is so that she'll understand always the decision behind it. And I said, you can always ask questions. So I'm not saying that a supporter shouldn't ask questions, but I'm saying when the supporter, when the staff member, when the pastor comes to the people, between the senior pastor and the people, and starts playing the Absalom stuff, two things will happen. One is you'll always get a bunch of people to go for you because you're saying what they want to hear, which is not a leader. That's certainly not a leadership trait. The second thing is, though, it's disloyalty. And what happened with Absalom? Here he was to be the king of Israel. He was by birthright the king. Of course, he lost everything, lost his life with the process, basically, of disloyalty. Now, let me give you the difference between faithfulness and loyalty. Faithfulness refers to actions. When a person has given a task and then they complete it properly, that person has been faithful. Loyalty refers to the heart. When a person honors the leader and gives without self-serving motives, then that person has become loyal. Now, I want to tell you something. There's a difference. You see the difference between faithfulness and loyalty? I was sitting down when I was, how old would I have been? This conversation would have been when I was 32, 33. I remember sitting down with a very successful person one day at a breakfast, of which he said, "John, I see that you're traveling pretty fast," and he said, "You're probably going to do quite well." He said, "The number one problem you're going to have in your life is that you're going to always look at people and ask, can I trust them?" And I remember as a 32-year-old kid laughing at the breakfast table, and I said, "You've got to be kidding." I said, I think you've got a suspicious heart, and I think, and this person who's much older than I am and much wiser than I am, who's already been there, just looked at me and said, "Just mark my words. There'll come to a time in your life when you'll ask, can I really trust this person?" And little did I realize by the time I got into 40, that's probably the number one question I have in my heart today. Can I really trust them? And I'm just talking to you as a staff. Not because I think people are non-trustworthy, but the higher you go in life, when people talk to you, you're never sure what their motives are. You're never sure what their agenda is. You're never sure if they're for you or if they're wanting something. And sometimes what they're wanting is very legitimate. So I'm not talking about people coming to me and wanting things that they shouldn't have. But the higher you go, the more exposure you have, the more vulnerable you are. And the higher you go, the one question, at this part of my life, basically over anything else that I really covet, is to have trustworthy people around me. People that I could truly, truly be myself, and they would trust me. And not twist it, not undermine it. I would not say question it, because I'm a leader that makes mistakes like any leader. So I'm not talking about not questioning. I'm talking about trusting people with your heart, I have a staff member the other day wrote me a beautiful note, and in that note, that staff member told me that one of the things they loved was the fact that I trusted them with things of the heart. And I really, again, that's a high quality. Again, this is not a Barbara Brummingen lesson, but of all the things I can say, the greatest things about her was, in 11 years, I never once heard anything from anybody that I could say would be misquoted from her. I never had to go to her one time, never once in 11 years, and say, "Barbara, did you say that? Did you talk to a person about this issue?" Not once. And of all the things that I loved about her the most, that's what by far that was by far the number one thing. I was safe with her. And I'm going to tell you something. Leaders are always looking to be with people that they're safe, because they have to have people that they trust around them. Let's talk about resiliency for a moment. I'm talking about perseverance now. I'm talking about the whole process of persevering in life itself, the ability to get up and handle problems and to do it with a certain amount of tenacity. If you'll notice, you'll see in your section, in your enjoy section, a trait shared by most winners is persistence. To learn persistence, remember these 5 suggestions. 1, ask yourself, what's the next step? 2, then ask, what is the way of taking that next step? Number 3, remove, disregard, or ignore the obstacle. 4, take the step. 5, go to number 1. It's a cycle. It's a cycle of continual problems, and our ability to get back up, never be down, but always be up or getting up is a gift and is a blessing to any leader. Let's talk about integrity for a moment. I'm moving through a couple of these kind of quickly because there are 2 of them that I still want to spend some time on. Without integrity, you don't have trust, and without trust, you have nothing. It's the glue that holds relationships together. In In a study at the UCLA Graduate School of Management on integrity, they found, and she notes, that integrity is the human quality most necessary to business success, according to 1,300 senior executives who responded to a recent survey. 71% put it at the top of the list of 16 traits responsible for enhancing an executive's effectiveness. Integrity in our life. Abraham Lincoln said, "When I lay down the reins of this administration, I want to have one friend left, and that friend is inside of me." That's integrity. That friend is inside of me. Being true to yourself, being true to those around you, being open, being honest, important trait. Big picture person is another one that leaders want to see in followers. Konrad Adenauer, remember, he was the chancellor for so long at Germany. He said, "We all live under the same sky, but we don't all have the same horizon." And in being a big picture person, there's a leader's responsibility and there's a follower's responsibility. The leader's part in casting the vision should be three things to the follower. One, walk alongside the follower. There cannot be a casting of vision without time spent together. A great teacher never strives to explain his vision. He simply invites you to stand beside him and see for yourself. Number two, expand the heart of the follower. All great leaders realize that our heart size will determine what we see. And so we don't try to picture the vision so much as to change the heart. Make the heart big enough and have a capacity to contain the dream and the vision that you have. It's a heart issue. And thirdly, personalize the vision. All leaders in casting the vision need to take whatever that dream is and put it in a personalized way. I think it is Dennis Waitley in one of his books talks about during World War II the parachutes that were being made by people who were making the chutes for the soldiers. And there was a tendency for it to be tedious work and laborious work and long work. And he said there was a tendency for them after a while to get very tired of it until one day they walked in and said, as you make every parachute, as you make that parachute, think of the fact that it may be your son or your husband that will wear that chute. And all of a sudden they personalized the dream, personalized the vision. All of a sudden, a little bit more care in the sewing, in the making and construction of the parachute. Why? The dream was visualized. Now that's the leader's responsibility. The follower's part in catching the vision. The leader casts it, the follower catches it. The follower's part in catching the vision, number one, is to think the leader's vision while doing your work. In other words, while you are doing your work, think the leader's vision. Now that doesn't happen often. Big picture people are hard to find. They're rare. There are not a lot of them out there. Usually a person, when they're doing their job, they think their job. They don't think of the vision of the leader. Toffler said, you've got to think big things while you're doing small things so that all the small things go to the right direction. Isn't that good stuff? How true it is. The second responsibility of the follower to catch the vision is to become possibility conscious. The more possibility conscious we are, the more that we will catch that vision. It will become a reality to us. There are those who think that the ability to see an obstacle is a mark of maturity and insight. Really, that's the easiest thing to see. God wants people who see beyond the problems, the possibilities. Number three, stay close to the leader. Stay close to the leader. If we're going to really catch the vision of the leader, there has to be a desire for us to learn from that leader. What I find interesting is two things. One is I find a lot of people, they think staying close to the leader means having a lot of personal time with the leader. If any of you that sit every month after month and listen to my Enjoy Life lessons, if you never had any contact outside of this forum, if there was no other contact, I think that's true for any pastor on staff, secretary, or whoever. I could take notes from my teaching sitting where you are, and I could be very close to me, because it doesn't take long for you to know what my heart is. If you don't know my heart, I don't want to be nasty. It's your fault. It's not my fault. If you haven't listened good enough to figure out what I believe in and what I think and what I value and what principles that I follow in my life, it has nothing to do with the fact we haven't taken a vacation together. It has everything to do with the fact you don't learn. You don't listen. You don't take notes and sit down and say those notes and say, what's this guy trying to tell me? Because if there's anything I can do, I can communicate. And I have the ability to very simply reduce things down to a norm that people can really grab hold of them. And so when I'm talking about staying close to the leader, I'm not even talking about time, although I think time is important and I think time is of essence. One of the things I've enjoyed doing is taking some of the staff, the pastors, with me when I do a conference. It's been very enjoyable to me just to be able to spend that good quality relational time. But you don't. It's not the time you spend with the leader. It's you watch him, you listen to him preach, you listen to him teach. You sit there, and there's all kind of things to glean if you just really want to learn. The only reason we wouldn't learn, the only reason you wouldn't know me, I don't mean this wrongly, is because you don't want to know me. That's the only reason. It wouldn't be because I'm some mysterious hard person to figure out. Shoot, all you'd have to do is go get my tape on 10 principles that guide my life and sit down and study those for an afternoon. And I'm so simple you could figure out every decision I make basically to come off those 10 principles. Life's really not complicated. You can know as much about me as really you want to know about me. Of course, we could say that's enough of it. I got all I want to know. You could be like Pensy, who taught me when I used to work in the butcher shop in college, working my way through college, and all he did was slaughter cattle. And he just said, "John, you ask too many questions. You don't want to know all those things." He said, "If you only know what I know, you can go home early. When you get your job done." And so some of us could have that kind of a mindset. But you have to catch the heart of the leader to be able to pass on the vision. Discipline is something that leaders want to see in their followers. Discipline is really delayed gratification. The ability to wait. In fact, I love it. I have another statement in there that it's not in your notes. Discipline is the ability to carry out a resolution long after the mood in which it was made is gone. Great statement on discipline. When the mood is gone, you can still do right. How do you do? I mean, are we constantly so controlled by our emotions that we basically have to feel it before we always do it? We've talked enough about that. John Luther has a great quote in there. There's no such thing as a perfect job. In any position, you'll find some duties which, if they aren't onerous immediately, eventually will be. Success depends not merely on how well you do things that you enjoy, but how conscientiously you perform those duties that you don't enjoy. Good stuff. Thomas Huxley. Perhaps the most valuable result of all education is the ability to make yourself do the thing that you have to do when it ought to be done, whether you like it or not. It's the first lesson that ought to be learned, and however early a man's training begins, it's probably the last lesson that he learns thoroughly. The ability to just do what you should do, regardless. Let me talk to you about the 10th. I made it this number 10, but to be honest with you, if I was categorizing, this would be number 2 or 3. It would be in the top 3, I know. This one with loyalty and growth potential probably would be my 3 most important ones. But this is gratitude. And this is not only my mission for you as a staff. I tell you right now, as a parent, let's forget staff. Let's forget leaders and followers and staff today. As a parent, what my number one mission for my kids is? For them to be grateful. And you know what the number one issue we deal with around the Maxwell house more than anything? Gratitude. Because my kids aren't grateful enough. Now, maybe you've got that down with your kids, and your kids are grateful, but my kids aren't. Not grateful enough. In fact, to be grateful enough to satisfy me probably is a pretty high standard. But I'm telling you, it's something that Margaret and I work on all the time. I remember one day I was having a discussion with JP about gratitude. I have a discussion with JP about gratitude every day of his life. And I was telling him, and I said, Joel, you've got to be more grateful. And he looked at me in his choleric look that he gives me, and he said, Dad, do you want me to say thank you for everything in life? I said, you guessed it. Now we're getting close. I said, that's right. 1,000 times yes. Everything in life you should be thanking God for, your parents for, life, the whole process. Absolutely. You see, what happens is when we are ungrateful, it shows us that we don't understand life. It goes to a basic understanding that everything we have was given to us. And that what we have, we don't deserve. Now, until we can get to that base, we'll never be grateful. Until my kids understand that whole process. Again, I've told the story when we had Michelle home for Christmas the one year as we were trying to adopt her, and her attitude toward all the gifts, and Joel Porter and Elizabeth's attitude toward the gift. I mean, it was a total different deal. Now, Now, I know this about Michelle. If we'd have gotten her in the family and she'd been 2 or 3 years in my household, after a while, I'd have been teaching her lessons on gratitude. Because you know what I found about gratitude? It is not true the more you have, the more grateful you are. In most people's lives, the more you have, the more ungrateful you are. And I think that's the killer. I think the major character flaw in people's lives is the fact that as they have something, there comes a transformation through some type of a cycle in their life until somehow we think we deserve it. And then we not only think we deserve it, we begin to depend upon it. And we not only then begin to depend upon it, then we begin to demand it. Now, do you see how this cycle begins to go? I think I deserve it. Well, I need it. Well, I want it. Now, until all of a sudden we develop into vicious monsters, until we walk around spoiled, demanding, sitting around wondering when's our train coming in and when do we get our due, and this whole and you know what the whole issue is? The whole issue is we don't understand what Paul said. When Paul said, he said, I consider myself to be a debtor. Now, you got to start there. You got to start there with what Paul understood about gratitude. He said, I consider myself to be in debt. He said, I'm in debt to the Greek. I'm in debt to the non-Greek. He said, I'm indebted to the whole world. He said, I'm in debt to God. He said everywhere I learn or turn around, he said, I owe somebody something. I said a quote in a sermon a few months ago that people enjoyed. The instant we were born, we already owe someone for 9 months of room and board. I mean, we literally, when the doctor takes his hand and smacks you on the bottom, you're in debt, baby. And you're in debt the rest of your life. And staff, I don't know how many of our Enjoy listeners are going to get good out of this, but I want to tell you something. I don't think that this staff is grateful enough. And I'm not trying to be critical to you, but I don't think that staff, I think that there's a sense of ingratitude on staff. Now, I'm not trying to pick on you, certainly not on an Enjoy Life tape that goes out to thousands of people. But now that I think about it, they're all going to know about it. But I think I don't think it's rare with Skyline staff. I think it's very common. In fact, when I talk to pastors across the country, senior pastors, the number one thing they'll talk to me about is the fact of the lack of gratitude of their staff. And the fact that the better they've got it, the more that they want. And there just seems to be, it's that vicious cycle I'm talking about. And I want to say this. Everything I am today, I owe to somebody. And I've only had 3 churches, but I followed 3 wonderful pastors. In my first church, it was a little church, but I followed an older pastor who had been faithful for God all of his life. And I'll tell you what I did. When I went there, Pastor Roll is his name, Lewis Roll. And every year, I'm 22, 23, 24-year kid. Every year I brought him back, had him come and preach in the pulpit. We always gave him a gift on behalf of the church, and I always thanked him for what he had done in that church. When I went to Lancaster, I was the 9th pastor in that church. They had 8 pastors previously. And when we built our building and built a huge auditorium and offices and things like that, one of the first things I did was I took the whole building and I named parts of the building after pastors. For example, we had a pastor named Tom Hermes, which was a great youth pastor. He loved the youth, and he was that was his mark on that church. And so the youth chapel was Hermes Chapel. And we named everything, and I brought them back, and we gave them plaques and pictures of their department areas that they were. And I remember, I think we gave them $2,000 each. It's just kind of love gifts from behalf of the church. But what I'm saying is, when I went to Lancaster, everything I had, the day I walked in, everything I had was given to me. There wasn't one thing I had that I could say I did anything to deserve it. And when I came to Skyline, this was a great church when I got here. It didn't become a great church when I didn't make this a great church. It was already a great church. We already had a great leader. My first thing I did in my board meeting, first thing I did was tell the board that I wanted to give a partial salary for Pastor Butcher for the rest of his life. And we set a number back in 1981. First thing I did on the board was we started paying him a salary. I remember that dear man came to me with tears in his eyes and said, John, what can I do? And do you want me to come down once a week and make calls for you or something? I said, no, you don't have to do nothing in life. This isn't because of what you're going to do. It's what you've already done. I said, you started this church, and when you started this church, they didn't have any money, and you denied yourself salaries, and you kept the salary low so you could get the church going. I said, you don't have to do one. You never have to show up again, and you get this salary. This is for what you've done. This is for who you are. This is for, you see, I look at churches, I look at Christians, and I look at pastors, and I say, how can they not understand that people who've gone before them have not only had value, but where they are today is because of people that have gone before. And I remember the second thing I did is I said to the board, we're making Pastor Emeritus and bring him back and give him a gold medallion of the church and the whole process. And every time I get a chance, I want to lift him up. Now all I'm saying is I can't imagine. I can't imagine me being here. The day that I got here, sure, the church is growing from 1,000. We had over 3,500 Sunday. Big deal. And let me tell you something. You have to get the first 1,000. The first 1,000 is a lot harder than the rest of them. And you got to start from scratch. And the day that we begin to forget this, I'm only doing this I'm just telling you stories because I want you to understand that gratitude it's not some kind of a gift. It's a choice that you make to be grateful. When we go back to our general conference, every year the general superintendent, the only person who knows is Steve Badney. But every time we have a general superintendent resign, I always sit down and write him a personal letter and thank them for their leadership, and always give them a love gift. And I mean, I've had general superintendents write me back. I remember when General Superintendent Mitchell resigned, he said, I went to my new place and my home, and I felt lonely, and he said, the first letter I received in my new residence was your letter. And I read your letter, and it says, this love gift. I mean, it's no big deal. It's just a love gift. They deserve it. And he said, John, he says, you don't know what that's done for me. Now, what I'm saying is I don't care whether you're a staff member, a senior pastor, a secretary, a custodian. I don't care what you are. You have a major character flaw if you're not grateful. And I can't make you grateful. It's a choice. But I do know this, that I believe it's the healthiest of all emotions. I believe sometime I'm going to do a message on the healthiest of all emotions, I believe, is gratitude. And the unhealthiest of all emotions is revenge. And you can go either side of the scale. You show me a person for revenge, and I'll show you a person they'll kill themselves down the road. But this issue of gratitude, the more we have, the more we should be grateful. But so many times, the more we have, the more we act like a bunch of spoiled kids, and we bicker and complain and draw lines and get petty. And I want to tell you something. That's not a God. And if you got those problems, don't go sitting around saying, oh, God, help me. Help yourself. Fix it. Straighten it out. It's a choice. And the quicker you'll take responsibility for some of these attitudes, the much quicker you'll get on the gratitude side. I want to be grateful for you. I want you to be grateful for me. I want you to be grateful for this church. I want you to be grateful for this heritage. That's why do I keep bringing Pastor Butcher back? 3/4 of the people don't even know who he is. I would never need to bring him back. I don't have any pressure to bring him back. Bring him back. Good Lord. 75% of the people wouldn't know who he was if I wouldn't bring him back. Why? I'll tell you why. It isn't healthy for this church to think that they got here on their own. It's not healthy for people to think that they have made it on their own without the past heritage and the past. There are people who've lived and died for this church and sacrificed and gave their lives and gave every bit of their tithe to this church, and they're never going to see that mountain. But I'm telling you, that mountain's as much as theirs as it is yours and mine. And we have to understand that. And as staff, we need to keep in our mind this whole issue of having a spirit of gratefulness and thankfulness. And if you're not a thankful, grateful person, you're a miserable person. One, you're miserable inside, and number two is I'm glad I'm not around you very much, because I'm telling you, that's poison. An ungrateful spirit is poison. It spreads, and I'm telling you, it becomes gangrene of the spirit and the soul, and it gets contagious until after a while, you got a bunch of people over here just having all kind of problems. Let's not have that. Let's be grateful. Let's be grateful for who we are, what we have, what God's given us. They're all gifts of God. How do you cultivate an attitude of gratitude? 3 things. 1, so simple. Number 1, realize your indebtedness to God, life, and others. Number 2, verbalize your appreciation on a daily basis. Did you hear me? On a daily basis. Verbalize appreciation. Why would you be around anybody without verbalizing appreciation? And 3, visualize your life without the help of God and without the help of others. What would it be if our life was void of all these blessings and all these people? Heard recently about a nobleman in India who had a gardener who stole little things around the property, but they were never worth much, and so he never really confronted him about it until one day he did steal a precious jewel in the family, of which when he was fleeing the household, he killed the nobleman's son. True story. They caught him. They brought him back with a sword ready to execute him. No one said, no, I forgive him. And not only forgave him, but he restored him his job as a gardener. 3 months later, the same gardener stole just a cup out of the kitchen, not worth much at all. They brought him back before the noble, and this time he had him executed. And the guy says, wait a minute, I killed your son, did the precious thing. He said, and I don't understand. He said, you didn't kill me for that. And the nobleman said, I'm not executing you for thievery. I'm executing you for ingratitude. And I think so many times we just miss the best that God has for us because we don't have a grateful spirit. Father, thank you for the staff. Thank you for our Enjoy listeners. I pray these 10 characteristics and qualities will be found in our staff. I just pray, God, you'll help me as a leader to cultivate those and encourage those qualities. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.